Welcome back to the Are You Being Real show. I'm sitting here with the one and only Ora Nadrich. Welcome back to the show.
I'm so thrilled to be back.
Well, in round one, we talked all about your first book, Says Who, How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever. And it's an amazing book. We dove deep into thought, and you're a thought boss. So if you want to learn all about your thoughts, then you'll have to go back and listen to episode 119, which was just about 2 years ago, I think May of 2017.
Wow, amazing. 2 years ago.
And you also have a new book out, Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity. And I'm just so stoked to dive in with you about this because this show is all about being real. And I think being mindful is really one of the key fundamentals to being authentic. So very excited to dive in with you on this topic. And for everyone who's tuning in, I mean, in addition to writing 2 amazing books with all sorts of incredible tools, you also are a mindfulness coach, a thought coach, and you are the founder and president of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. So without further ado, stoked to have you back on the show. And I love opening up these episodes with an authentic share or story from the guest. And we had you on about 2 years ago. So I'm curious to know, what's been happening in your life since we had you last on the show. I know you got a new book out. And so what is your Am I Being Real story? What's been real for you? And what was the impetus that made you write your book?
It was the passing of my sister Esther, who passed away right before I wrote Live True. And she was an extraordinary spirit on the planet. I miss her terribly, but she, I feel, is my North Star. I feel she guides me every day. And her passing really brought me into such a deeper, I should say, awareness of the preciousness of life. For anybody who's lost a loved one or experienced deep loss, they know what it means to feel so open, so raw. And that for me, her passing, if I could say what was the thought that came through was live now, live true. That's the title of the book. Live this moment as if it's the only moment of your life worth living. Do you know? And she really, as I said, she was the inspiration. And, every day since I've written Live True, I find that becomes the way in which I awaken each morning in gratitude. Do you know? So why wait for something like a loss or something that really breaks our heart to have us be so real and awake and authentic in the moments of our life?
Mm-hmm. An amazing lesson, and unfortunately one that you learned the hard way with the loss of your sister.
Yeah.
And I know when the idea of, talking about living in the now and having read Live True, it's not just living in the now as like at this point of my life. It's like literally living in the now, in this second and in this moment. And
Exactly.
I think that is a really powerful and liberating way to live, to accept the current moment. So I had a couple follow-up questions in regards to your story. Do you feel like you weren't living in the now before that?
I think I've always been very attracted to the present, but I, like millions of other people, fell into the trap of living in what I call 2 time frames that don't exist. One being the past, which is come and gone, and one being the future, which isn't here yet. So I think the more you become cognizant of present time, which you and I are in right now, because we're here, we're having this conversation, and I don't know about you, but I'm not thinking about anything else. That understanding is so much more present for me, if you will. Whereas prior to that, I wasn't a mindfulness teacher. I didn't take a deep dive into learning mindfulness. And once I really came to know what it is, I felt like I had found a pot of gold. Do you know? And that mindfulness, which is a quality each and every one of us has, but don't necessarily know it and don't necessarily know how to use it. So if I'm answering your question, I definitely live more present today than I ever have before.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I remember last time you were on the show, you had said that you really had felt like you had reconciled your past.
Yes.
And you said that sometimes all the to-dos, you're thinking maybe a little bit about the future in the present moment, but it sounds like you've really, with writing the book, have just continued to deepen your understanding and practice of being present. So I'm curious to learn more as to, what that looks like specifically in your life, and maybe an example of what you would have done before versus what you do now.
Well, the past for me is so much about what we can take from it as opposed to what we lament about what we didn't do. So for me, the past is a great teacher. And if we can take what we've learned from the past, which is when you say, whether resolve or reconcile what we've experienced in the past, we carry so much of our past into our present. So for me, I want to utilize the past in the most beneficial way in the present. And so when you say, I've reconciled it or I've resolved it, we are works in progress and we are constantly evolving and we're constantly growing. And what we want to be mindful of is when we start to slip into the areas of thinking that pull us back into the memories that cause us unhappiness. So I try and make a very concerted effort to, again, take what I've learned from the past and apply it to the present. So in the past, I didn't live like that. I felt that I was more at the effect of what had happened, and I would feel it in the body. And, as I say, our thoughts create our emotions, create behavior, create reality, and we need to connect those dots. So I think one day I realized, certain thoughts that we have just don't make us feel good. And I had a real big aha moment. I was like, I want to understand that better. I want to understand why we're so at the effect of our pain. Well, behind our pain, there's a lot to discover, and many times we're caught in the emotionality of what we're feeling and we don't know the thoughts that are around it. So that's how I've taken the learnings from that and applied them to today and really what I want to share with others.
Fantastic. There's so many learnings, and it's something that I'm really learning today is there's so many things that drive my behavior and my actions and thoughts that I don't even realize how deep rooted they are attached to my past. Mm-hmm. So as someone who considers myself to be mindful and emotionally intelligent, I'm realizing that there's just so many layers in terms of really understanding myself and the way I think and the way that I be.
There are so many layers, and that's a great way to put it. I say it's like peeling the onion. We're constantly, lifting the veils of illusion, and we're constantly, lifting veils and, coming to become more aware of ourselves. It's heightening our awareness and raising our consciousness. We're in this body, and I love that quote. I want to say his name, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So we're going to get caught up in our human experience, and we're going to really sometimes ignore that we're spirits and we're at the effect of a lot of things that happen to us. And how we really respond and sometimes react to life is that our past wounds, our past memories, a lot of things that really help shape us. And some of our traumas really come into play when we're in the present. So where mindfulness comes in so beautifully is that we become so present with what we're feeling in the moment that might be an insecurity that became developed from our childhood, that we've carried into from childhood into adulthood, that we can say, I'm feeling nervous right now, or I'm feeling insecure. We have these reminders. I say it's like mindfulness whispers in our ear, hey, what's going on? You're uncomfortable right now, or you're insecure right now, or you're frightened about what might happen, or here's a person walking up to you and you're starting to feel something in your body. So we need to work with that. We're not going to eradicate those feelings. We're not going to stop those thoughts, but we want to be able to be mindful of them so that we can work with them consciously in the present.
Speaking, you said present, and in your book, you talk about the magic of the present moment. So I wanted to invite you to go into that. I know you speak into that in any moment there is a great learning opportunity. And I know that comes with accepting the present moment. But I really like the idea of looking at every moment as magical, even the ones that might not feel so good.
Yes, every moment is an opportunity. And I say there's something to learn from every moment, not just the joyful ones. We want to hurry the difficult moments along.
I definitely do.
We don't want to hang out in painful moments. We don't say, oh, yeah, let me just hang out here for a while because this feels so bad. This is where I want to be. Mindfulness teaches us to be present in the moment and to be aware of what we're feeling in the moment so that we can learn from it. We can evolve. We can grow. And when you really are present, even in the difficult moments, and acknowledge them as such, that's when the learning starts to happen. So even in all your pain, and I know that not everybody has birthed, but every moment is a birth. Whether you're physically birthing or you're birthing the growth of a moment, we're all birthing. And sometimes it is painful and hellish. And we have to just breathe into it, move into it. And that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the magic is, on the other side of the difficulty. Do you know?
Yeah, I suppose that if I'm resisting something or I'm fighting something, I'm probably just making myself feel worse, putting more energy into it, probably prolonging it, versus the idea of embracing it and accepting it and wondering what I have to learn from it so I can then respond versus react to whatever that feeling or situation is. What I'm curious about is where you feel authenticity kind of plays into this equation, because I love asking everyone I have on the show, like what their definition is of authenticity and what it means. And everyone's got a pretty similar answer, but I find that anything can be spun off as authentic because, the stories that we tell ourselves about, who we are and what we're capable of, or the feeling of insecurity in a certain situation, that certainly feels authentic in the moment. Now, whether that's like authentic in like your pure, divinity and form, that's a different story. So I'm curious to know that in those situations where perhaps what feels authentic for me might be being nervous about a project that I'm working on or all of my to-dos. So I'm kind of curious to hear where authenticity and mindfulness, the intersection of them.
Good question and good explanation. The sort of the Merriam-Webster definition of authentic or authenticity is real, genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the words that come to mind, And what I say in Live True is authenticity is being who you really are, your true self, your true essence, which can also be called your Buddha nature, So you can take just about anything and say, well, my nervousness is authentic. My anger is authentic. What I'm feeling right now feels really real for me. Do you know? So where do you take that and apply it to, are you being who you really are? And then adding mindfulness to that. And are you being present in your anger? Are you being present in your anxiousness? Are you being mindful? So I like to combine. I say it's integral in that being aware, being mindful, being authentic, they're all related. Do you know? And I know that right now you can call a lot of things authentic, but are they authentic for a reason that is advancing you consciously? Or are you doing it for selfish, me-centric reasons? Do you know?
Yeah.
So I use authenticity applied to Live True as far as being your most real self and standing naked. And I don't mean disrobed. I mean, like you are presenting yourself to another human being as real and as authentic, as true to who you really are. You don't have the masks on. You're not wearing the veils. You're not hiding. You're not being dishonest. That's really the sort of the areas in which I'm tapping into authenticity.
I love it because I see so much value, and personally for me, being open and being honest, or at least as open and honest as I can be, it's created all sorts of opportunities. It's created a lot of connection and closeness with people that maybe I'd have no relationship with. I also find that by being real and like just telling people what's actually alive and like what's happening for me in my life and things that I'm scared of or what's going on, I connect with people faster as well. So I think as like a relationship building tool, it's like absolutely like 100% valuable. But
It's
I think
very disarming.
Yeah.
In your realness, you can really make more people feel comfortable in their realness.
Sure. Where I think it gets interesting is like when it comes into like work. For example, if like you take on a client or a project and like there's insecurities about the project or the work, then if you tell them that, you could lose credibility. So I think that that's where that fine line is in terms of like really being authentic within a certain role that we're playing in our lives. So I think that that's really interesting. And I think that in terms of determining like and being able to state, oh, this is authentic or this is inauthentic. I know you use the word like conscious. And I think that that's like a pretty obvious way of looking at it, where like if you're blatantly lying to someone or you're blatantly being dishonest, I think that that's an easier trigger to be like, okay, I'm being inauthentic, or like I'm working this job and I actually hate it.
Right.
I think is a little bit more obvious than something that is a little bit more subtle based off of like we've just been doing something a certain way all of our life based off something maybe that happened when we were a kid. And it's a little less obvious to know that maybe that's inauthentic to your true nature.
Yeah. I mean, I think a really good way to gauge your authenticity is to really know what you want. So if you can really check in with yourself and say, and this is like from the minute you wake up and all that you do in your day, you know, and you brought up a working situation, you know, I love to ask that question, what do I want from myself? And what do I want from another person? Do you know, we are full of a lot of contradictions and we have a lot of needs and wants and desires. So I think a great way to check in with self, and I talk about that in Live True, taking a spiritual pulse, you know, waking up each day and really check in with self. You know, what is it that I want? What do I want from today? What is it that I want to do? You know, what's my purpose? You know, and that doesn't mean you have to, you know, come up with the cure for cancer. It means that like, what do you want to accomplish just in your day?
Sure.
And then the authenticity of self really has the ease to be. I remember being at a party, a very big, during the days when I was an actress, I was at a big Hollywood party and I was standing next to a very famous, wonderful person who shall remain nameless.
Okay.
And everybody was doing the perfunctory, hi, how are you? How are you doing? Hi, a lot of highs, how are you? And I remember she stopped and she said, and I was very young, I was like 22, and she said, wouldn't it be great if everybody just really said how they were feeling? And I remember like I had such an aha moment. I was like, can we do that? Can we actually say how we're feeling? Like how we're really feeling? And not that you have to go into a whole song and dance about, let me tell you how I'm feeling, you know, and do a big storytelling about it. But we are so used to being in these sort of roles and identities and personas, and to really drop in and say, how are you? Even if you said, you know what, Ora, it's been a tough week. I'm kind of whatever you want to share or don't want to share, you know, that's personal. But I think oftentimes we feel like we have to present ourselves to each other in a way that oftentimes we know this because we've done it and we've seen it in someone else when we know that that's not what's really going on.
Right.
It's not that we have to always spill our guts, and it's not that we have to overshare. I think there's a fine line between really being able to feel comfortable to share with a friend that you feel safe with, and that, you know, you don't have to be chipper all the time. You know, writing says who, I always say, I didn't write a book about, oh, let's just be positive all the time. And, you know, let's just, you know, although I believe in the law of attraction, I also know that that's not real. You can't stay in a state of positivity all the time. And that sometimes we're going to have what I call a gray day. I like to use the Crayola box, is that there's gray in there and there's black in there.
Yeah.
We couldn't paint pictures if we didn't have all the colors.
Yeah, so, just like overcast days.
Exactly.
Literally.
It's okay to have a gray day. So sometimes it's really nice to be able to be the person, you know, if you're somebody who's comfortable sharing, I'm the same way as you are. I'm not uncomfortable saying the truth. I'm not uncomfortable holding the space or being the container. And I realize it's very difficult for a lot of people. And sometimes people feel they have to be on all the time or be positive all the time. And although I don't subscribe to being negative or being a downer, but it's okay to share when you're not in such a high place. And I would like to see more of that. I would like to have us be able to share more openly and be more disarming with one another. I think then we wouldn't be so inauthentic. We wouldn't be hiding so much. Do you know?
You say in your book that desire and attachment lead to unhappiness and suffering.
Well, actually, the Buddha said that.
The Buddha said that. Well, I'll give credit to you.
But, I like to quote the Buddha a lot.
So with that knowledge, how can we create maybe a more healthy, supportive relationship with our desires and our attachments?
Well, I think that attachment and desire is natural. But where mindfulness always is wonderful to bring into the mix is to be mindfully aware of our desires and our attachments, so that when we find ourselves at the effect of our attachments and our desires, we're clear as to why we have them. Do you know? And that can be plugged into just about anything. It could be plugged into food, eating, sex, addiction. Do you know that those are the areas that we need to look at really closely, because sometimes we haven't been mindful of our desires and our attachments, and it's created behaviors out of compulsivity. And so mindfulness really helps us know when something is enough, do you know, so that our desires aren't insatiable and our attachments are clear to us. Do you know, we form attachments. Somebody was asking me once about, so does mindfulness mean that you detach? That, or non-reactivity, which I talk about in both books, about being an observer rather than a reactor, which is also a mindful awareness of why I'm about to say something, that could be hurtful to another person. Is it helps us know what it is, again, that we desire, and it helps us be clear about what our attachments mean to us. Do you know, attachments can go into all sorts of areas. Can go into excess, as can desires.
You mentioned about being the observer, and like you said that people have asked you, whether you detach. So I think it's interesting in terms of being present. I know for me, as someone who strives to be mindful and aware of my thoughts, there's also times that I might get lost in a moment where I, am reactive per se, or might, get a little angry or be a little argumentative in a relationship. And so my question for you is kind of going back to the present moment and I know you have so many tips and tools as to how to get present. So I'm curious to know what pulls you out of the present moment, and what are some of your favorite ways of getting back and being present?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I wrote these 2 books, and yes, I have negative thoughts, and yes, I step out of the moment. So but I've done a deep dive in both of those areas. I'm a seeker, and I like to go into the areas that really are difficult for us. So I go into the present. Excuse me. See, there you go. That's a slip right there. I go into the present because I like to hang out there. But I would say I go more into the future. And in my book, if you recall, I break it down into 3 descriptions.
They're great.
Are you a past dweller? Are you a present experiencer? Or are you a future chaser? Now, you might be all of them.
Yeah.
Do you know? So I would say for me, I probably go more into the future than I go into the past.
Yeah.
The past for me is done.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like a snake. You can't crawl back into a skin that you've shed. Do you know? And so what pulls me out of the present time for me would be when I'm thinking about something that I might have energy on. So for me, to just answer your question specifically, that's my area. I kind of go boop into the future, and then I go, oh, there you go. And for anybody who's a meditator, meditation is about trying to not stop your thoughts. That's I think a lot of confusion around meditation. We think between 40 and 70,000 thoughts a day. We're not cognizant of all of our thoughts, and the thoughts that get most of our energy are the negative ones or the fear-based ones. So in meditation, you can anchor your busy monkey mind. The Buddhist term for the busy mind is by bringing your focus and awareness, if you're doing a mindful meditation, to the breath, which anchors you and brings you back to the present moment. So I work on that one. I'm aware that sometimes I go into the future chaser.
I definitely do. I would say that I'm a future chaser probably the most. And I'm also a past dweller, but not necessarily a past dweller in longing for the past or rewriting the past. It's more that I'm a past dweller in thinking about like things that have happened to me in the past. Are they going to happen to me again? So I think, fear about relationship, like I'm divorced, the fear of getting divorced again, or being this idea of feeling like I was left. Those things like is being a past dweller, even though it doesn't consciously necessarily feel like I'm living in the past.
Right.
And then I think when I choose to be a present experiencer, that's actually when I'm free.
There you go.
So,
I think we're done.
yeah. Yeah.
We're free.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect, really,
Yeah.
word for that, Mark. And I love that you said that, because when we get those moments, where we're just there, and there's so many things to call that, it's those exquisite moments. You can call them the space between the thoughts. You feel non-separateness. You feel you're at one. Those are those wonderful moments that we glimpse where we're so in the moment of now that we feel free. Now, we know that we can't stay there all the time, because we're human beings we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But being aware of that, even like you saying, yeah, I can be a past dweller, and some of the things that you mentioned, like I was divorced, and is that going to happen to me again? And so when you go into mindful awareness of that, like, can I be okay being in this moment right now and not knowing? Am I okay with that? Can I just free fall, which is a word I love to use, like just free falling into this moment of now, like I'm not attached to that thought. I'm not attached to what happened to me before, and I'm not attached to what might or could happen to me in the future. I am in this moment, and it's not about labels or anything. It's like, I'm just here. And that's such a great place to be. So freedom is the perfect word. And we want more of that.
Yep.
And we can have more of that.
Yep. In your book, you give a bunch of great ways as to how to realign into the present moment. And life gazing is something that you talk about, and I love that phrase.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you can tell us about life gazing and some other tips and tools that you have that support you or support your clients in getting present.
Life gazing is one of my favorites, and thank you for bringing that one up. I feel like I've got like my goodie bag, and like the fact that I can share it with people and then they could say it back to me. It's like, oh, I hope you love this as much as I do, because life gazing is really when you go into present moment awareness. I do it not, when I'm driving or when you're in an activity, but like at a red light. I talk about that, like life gazing. And that's when time really stands still. So I'm watching people that are crossing the street. I'm looking at a bird, or I love birds, and I love to see like, oh, there's an eagle that just flew across the sky that I see a lot of times outside my window. And life gazing moments are really such great moments that really bring us into present moment awareness. So that's a big favorite of mine. And if you're caught up in sort of the current, the mayhem of life, which we are, the busyness and the doing as opposed to being, try and, discipline yourself to catch moments of, life gazing, because that'll bring you right back into present moment appreciation. Another one that I really like is thought alignment, which is starting my day, again, checking in with myself and being aware of the thoughts that I'm telling myself. Are my thoughts aligned with what my intention is for the day? That's another real helpful one. Do they support my well-being, and are the thoughts that I'm telling myself supporting me going out to do what I want to do today? So that's another really helpful one that I use. Taking the spiritual pulse, check in with self, the core. I like to, from a chakra alignment, it's the solar plexus for me. I love to check in with my solar plexus, check in with your heart chakra. There's just a lot of ways to align, recalibrate, and really make sure that we're in present moment awareness.
Yeah. And I'm sure when your thoughts don't align with your intention for the day, you go to the Says Who manual and go into your thoughts and create a different perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, something is easy. I was just teaching at 1440 Multiversity, and with Dr. Ronald Alexander and doing a workshop called Mind, Mood, and Happiness, Transforming the Self. And I used one of the techniques that I have in Says Who, which is release and replace. It's really a wonderful perk. I'd love people to get familiar with the other methods, the Says Who method, but it's like literally replacing a negative thought, releasing a negative thought and replacing it with its positive counterpart. So there's all these wonderful little tricks and tools and, in your sort of like spiritual toolkit to get through the day that you can use that are just so helpful.
Also good. I wanted to ask you a few colorful questions so we can get to know you better. So you've been practicing meditation for over 30 years and have been teaching. So I'm curious to know, like, in terms of your personal growth, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm proud of the discoveries that I've made on my life journey. I'm proud of where I've taken myself. I'm proud of that I didn't run away when I was afraid. I didn't lose hope. And I believed in something that was greater. And, I call it like divine presence. It's like numinous. It's whatever it is for each and every one of us. It's different that I trusted, that I believed sometimes in what I couldn't even see. That was what I call the invisible. Do you know? And that's not always easy to do. So I'm proud of that I kept moving myself along, even when it was really hard, even when it was really painful. There was something in me that said, keep going, just keep going. The journey of life is this mystery, and it's this journey of awakening, and you want to meet it. You don't want to run from it. You don't want to hide from it. And it's okay to be afraid, by the way. It's okay. It's really okay for us to be afraid, but to keep ourselves moving and to meet those moments. And that's what being present is about. Meet those moments.
That is so inspiring. I know it's like it can be really tough on dark days or when things kind of continually go bad. So to maintain hope and to keep going. I know you've had, multiple different careers and, acting. So it's super inspiring to see how far you've come and what you're creating to give back to others.
Thank you.
So kind of flip it. What do you think your greatest opportunity for growth is?
To really just go deeper into the unknown and to really walk my talk and to practice free falling even when I feel afraid. So the very pearls that I like to share with others that I think is born from my wisdom, I want to practice those even more in my own life.
Is there something that you teach that's toughest for you to practice?
Probably sometimes what I said about jumping into the future. So maybe that is, I'm also really intuitive, sometimes almost like psychic, and I tend to be a visionary. So sometimes I get ahead of myself. So that's something I have to be mindful of. Do you know?
I do. And that's such like that's the dance of life, right? of having a vision for the future that you aim to create, yet still staying present.
Yeah. So, and sometimes also that conjures up patience. Yeah. Because when you get really inspired by like, this could be so great. And, this, I can manifest it this way. Yeah. But that moment isn't now. Right. It really tests your patience.
For sure. I'm experiencing that right now with the Love Bomb app I'm building and wanting to bring it to life. And there's just a lot of steps that get to happen before it's in the App Store.
The steps.
Yeah. And then the last question of this colorful part of the interview I'm really curious about. You had a quote in the book that speaks to not only the importance of individual authenticity and presence, but this collective idea of authenticity and presence. So I wanted to invite you to speak into that because I know it's tough enough individually to be present and authentic. But what about like on a bigger scale, bigger picture?
Well, I think we're all part of the collective. Everything that we say and do, it is very cause and effect. And to think otherwise is, I believe, naive. So for me, I know that everything I do in deed, action, every manifestation of what I put out into the universe is affecting others. You know, it's like that great, I think the Dalai Lama, for the sentient of all beings, you know, may all our actions, may all our deeds, may all our behavior be for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's not just for me. It's so that I can raise and heighten awareness and consciousness on the planet.
Yeah. I think that oftentimes we get caught up in our own worlds and our own stories and stuff. And it's like this ripple effect, because I believe energy is contagious. Like if I have a big smile, I might ignite a smile in someone else, and they might ignite a smile in somebody else, you know, versus conversely, if I'm angry at someone, I might piss somebody else off, and then they might piss somebody else off as well. So our ripple effect definitely extends pretty far.
Absolutely.
To kind of close out this interview, what can we do to support you? I know you've got a lot of stops and events here on the book tour. Is there anything else aside from buying the book?
Yes. Well, I'd love for people to get the book. I think there's a wonderful, you know, like I said, toolkits in there that they can use to help them awaken more. I do have some book signing events coming up. So there's that. And go on my website, oranadrich.com. That's got all my things happening there. Do you know what I'm doing, and events that continue that we post on my website?
Definitely go to oranadrich.com, get a copy of Live True. It's really an excellent book. I mentioned this to you off air. I just really like the tone of the book. It's very, it's got a very welcoming and kind of soft, sweet, soulful tone to it, as well as many meditation practices throughout, so you can really apply the lessons in the book. So it gives you those tangible tips.
By the way, just quickly on that note, I did a whole audio of the meditations, and they're really lovely, and they're to music, and they're all on the music outlets like
amazing.
TuneCore and Spotify and Pandora, all of that. So the Live True meditations. So
good. You have a very soothing voice, so I'll have to check those out myself.
Thank you.
Any closing words that you want to leave with listeners of Are You Being Real? Maybe something that you thought about saying when you were driving over, or just any other words of encouragement to close out this episode?
You know, really live true, live you.
The one and only Ora Nadrich. Ora, thank you. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you,
Book number 3.
Yes, thank you. I would love to join up with you again.
Let's do it.